September 4th, 1939, the Western Front. Along the French-German border, around 95 French divisions and about 10 British divisions face roughly 25 German divisions. The Allies have numerical superiority, better tanks, more artillery. Germany's best troops are hundreds of miles away in Poland. The German Siegfried Line defenses are incomplete, undermanned, vulnerable. This is the moment, the perfect opportunity. France could punch through, reach the rural industrial region, cripple Germany's war machine. Poland, fighting for its life against the Wehrmacht, desperately needs this attack. Britain and France guaranteed they would strike Germany within 2 weeks. So what happens? Nothing. British soldiers dig trenches. French troops sit behind the Maginot Line playing cards. German soldiers on the other side of no man's land wave at them. Propaganda leaflets are dropped on Germany instead of bombs. Football matches are organized. The war that was declared 5 days ago isn't being fought. This is the story of the Phony War, the strangest period of World War II. 8 months from September 1939 to May 1940, when two armies stared at each other across fortifications and did almost nothing. 8 months when civilians wondered if the war was even real. 8 months that would convince Hitler the Western democracies would never fight. For the next 30 minutes, you're going to experience the Phony War month by month from September through November 1939. You'll see British soldiers arriving in France, expecting immediate combat, instead finding boredom. You'll meet French troops safe behind the Maginot Line, living in underground cities with wine cellars and cinemas. You'll experience civilian life in Britain, where rationing, blackouts, and evacuations created upheaval, without the actual war arriving. And you'll understand why this period of false security would make the disaster of May 1940 so much worse. Most histories focus on the dramatic battles of World War II. They skip over the Phony War as a boring interlude. But this period is crucial. The 8 months of inaction gave Hitler time to prepare his Western offensive. It allowed Germany to concentrate forces that were scattered. It created complacency in Allied armies and civilian populations. And it demonstrated to Hitler that Britain and France lacked the will to fight aggressively. The Phony War wasn't just a quiet period. It was the West losing the war before the fighting even started. Let's begin in early September, right after Britain and France declared war on Germany. September 4th through 10, 1939. The British Expeditionary Force, that's Britain's army, begins deploying to France. Around 160,000 men in 4 infantry divisions. They cross the English Channel in convoys, land at French ports, then travel by train to positions along the Belgian border. Private James Thompson is 22 years old from Manchester, joined the Territorial Army 2 years ago. He boards a ship at Southampton on September 8th with his unit, the 2nd Battalion Royal Warwickshire Regiment. He expects to go straight into combat. Poland has been fighting for a week. Surely Britain's army will immediately attack Germany. The crossing takes 4 hours. They land at Le Havre. French civilians cheer them, throw flowers, offer wine. The British soldiers are confused. This doesn't feel like war. This feels like a parade. They board trains heading northeast. Private Thompson writes in his diary that night, "Passed through beautiful French countryside. Villages looked peaceful. Saw no signs of war. Where are the Germans? When do we fight?" They reach their positions near Lille on the French-Belgian border on September 11th. They start digging trenches, not attacking German positions. Not advancing, just digging in. Thompson's commanding officer explains, "We are establishing defensive positions. The plan is to wait for German attack, then counter." Thompson is bewildered. "But sir, shouldn't we be attacking them? Poland needs our help." The officer shrugs. "Those are the orders from command. Dig trenches. Wait." This scene repeats across the British Expeditionary Force. Soldiers arrive, expecting combat, find themselves digging defensive positions instead. Meanwhile, on the French side, September 7th, 1939, France launches the SAR offensive. Finally, an attack on Germany. This is what Poland has been waiting for. About a dozen French divisions cross into Germany's Saar region. Initial objectives are limited. probe German defenses, capture some border territory, force Germany to divert troops from Poland. The French advance is cautious, very cautious. They move about 5 miles into German territory in the first 3 days. They encounter light resistance, mostly border guards and some reserve units. The German Siegfried Line fortifications are incomplete. This is the moment to push through, but French commander Maurice Gamelin orders a halt on September 12th. The troops dig in. They've captured a few border villages. Gamelin declares this a success. The French hold these positions for 3 weeks, then withdraw back to the Maginino Line in October. The SAR offensive accomplishes nothing. It doesn't divert German troops from Poland, it doesn't threaten Germany's industrial regions, it doesn't even maintain the captured territory. Poland receives no meaningful help. French soldiers are confused by the strategy. Sergeant Pierre Dubois writes home to his wife on September 15th. We advanced into Germany, met little resistance, then stopped. Now we're just sitting here. The Germans wave at us from their positions, we wave back. Sometimes we trade cigarettes in no man's land. This is the strangest war I've ever heard of. September through October 1939. The pattern establishes itself. The Phony War. The British call it that. The French call it the Droll Deer, the Funny War. The Germans call it Blitzkrieg, the Sitting War. All 3 names capture the absurdity. Here's what daily life looks like on the Western Front. In autumn 1939, British soldiers wake up in their trenches or billets. They eat breakfast, usually tinned beef and tea. Then they perform maintenance tasks, clean weapons, repair fortifications, organize supplies. In the afternoon, there might be training exercises. In the evening, leisure time. They play football, write letters home, listen to radio broadcasts from BBC. They go to sleep. Repeat the next day. No combat, no artillery exchanges, no infantry assaults, just waiting. Private Thompson writes in his diary on September 28th, 3 weeks in France. Haven't fired my rifle once except at training ranges. The Germans are 500 yards away, but we don't shoot at them. They don't shoot at us. High Command has apparently decided this is a waiting game. Waiting for what? I don't know. French soldiers have it even better. Most French divisions are stationed behind the Maginino Line, the massive fortification system built along the German border. The Maginot Line is extraordinary. Underground complexes with barracks, kitchens, hospitals, ammunition stores connected by tunnels, and electric railways. Artillery turrets that rise from the ground, fire, then retract. It cost billions of francs and took 10 years to build. French troops inside the Maginino Line live in relative comfort, heated underground rooms, fresh food brought by supply trains, wine with meals. Some sections have movie theaters. There are rest areas with ping-pong tables. The idea was to create a defensive system so strong that French troops could simply wait behind it while Germany exhausted itself attacking. Corporal André Martin is stationed in one of the major Maginot forts near Metz. He writes home on October 5th. Life here is comfortable. We work 4-hour shifts manning the artillery. Rest of the day is leisure. Played cards this afternoon. Won 50 francs from Bertrand. Had beef stew and red wine for dinner. Cinema tonight showing a comedy from Paris. Hard to believe there's a war on. The problem is obvious. These soldiers aren't fighting. They're not training for offense. They're not preparing to attack Germany. They're sitting in comfortable defensive positions, waiting for something to happen. And what about German soldiers on the other side? September through October 1939. Germany has roughly 25 divisions on the Western Front. Most are reserve units, older men, limited training. Germany's best troops and newest equipment are in Poland, crushing Polish resistance. Hitler gambled that France wouldn't attack during Poland's campaign. He was right. German soldiers on the western border are relieved that France isn't attacking. They're outnumbered 4-1. If France had launched a major offensive in early September, these German divisions would have been overrun quickly. Instead, they watch French and British forces dig in. They dig their own trenches. They wait. Sometimes they shout across no man's land. Why aren't you attacking? German soldiers yell in broken English. Poland is dying. Your allies need you. British soldiers have no answer. There are occasional skirmishes. Small patrols meet in no man's land. A few shots exchanged. Someone gets wounded. But these are accidents more than combat. Neither side wants a fight. The strangest incident occurs on October 16th. A British patrol encounters a German patrol near the Luxembourg border. Both sides raise their weapons, then realize neither wants to shoot. They stand there awkwardly for a moment. Then a German officer pulls out cigarettes, offers them to the British. The British officer accepts. They share cigarettes, exchange pleasantries about the weather, then return to their respective lines. Private Thompson hears about this incident. He writes in his diary, "This war makes no sense. We're supposed to be fighting the Germans. Instead, we're trading cigarettes with them. Meanwhile, Poland is being destroyed. Our allies are screaming for help and we're sitting here doing nothing. October 1939, while the Western Front sleeps, Poland dies. Warsaw surrenders on September 28th. The last Polish resistance ends on October 6th. Tens of thousands of Polish soldiers dead. Over 600,000 captured by Germany and the Soviet Union. Poland erased from the map, and the Western Allies did nothing to help. When news of Poland's final surrender reaches British and French troops, there's shame. These soldiers joined the army to defend freedom, to stop fascism, to help Poland. Instead, they sat in trenches playing cards while Poland fought alone. Private Thompson writes on October 8th, "Poland has fallen. We declared war to protect Poland. We sent them promises that we'd attack Germany. We did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Every man in my unit feels the shame of it. We wanted to fight. Command wouldn't let us. What was the point of declaring war if we weren't going to wage it? French soldiers feel the same shame. Sergeant Dubois writes home on October the 10th, Poland needed us. We had the army, the weapons, the position to help them. Our generals chose caution over honor. Now Poland is gone, divided between Hitler and Stalin. And we sat behind our Maginot Line drinking wine. I don't understand this war. But if soldiers on the Western Front are frustrated by inaction, what about civilians back home? September through November, 1,939 of Britain. For British civilians, the war feels surreal. Prime Minister Chamberlain declared war on September 3rd. Everyone expected immediate air raids. Children were evacuated from cities on September 1st before war was even declared. Operation Pied Piper, which we mentioned in episode 3, relocated over 3 million children from urban areas to countryside. But the expected bombing doesn't come. September passes, October passes, November passes, no German bombers, no air raids, no combat. Instead, there's disruption without danger. Rationing begins in early October, petrol is rationed first, food rationing preparations start, butter, sugar, meat will be rationed soon. People queue for supplies that aren't even scarce yet, creating artificial shortages. The blackout is enforced strictly. Every night, all lights must be covered or turned off so German bombers can't see targets. Street lights are extinguished, car headlights are masked, windows must have blackout curtains, air raid wardens patrol neighborhoods checking for violations. The problem is there are no air raids. The blackout causes more British casualties than German bombs in late 1939. Traffic accidents spike. Pedestrians walking in complete darkness get hit by cars. People trip on unlit stairs, walk into lampposts, fall into canals. In September 1939, road deaths double compared to peacetime. Mary Collins lives in London with her 2 young children. She writes in her diary on October 20th, "Another night of blackout. Tommy tripped on the steps yesterday and broke his wrist because we couldn't see anything. No streetlights. No house lights showing for what? Where are the German planes? We evacuated the children, disrupted their education, separated families. We're living in darkness, rationing food, and nothing is happening. People are starting to call it the Boer War because we're bored waiting for something to happen. The term catches on. The Boer War, because the war is boring. Declared, but not fought. Disruptive, but not dangerous. Theater and cinema attendance booms. If bombs aren't falling, might as well enjoy entertainment. Dance halls are packed. Pubs are full. There's an odd atmosphere. War has been declared. Everyone's lives are disrupted. But the actual fighting hasn't reached Britain. It feels unreal. Some evacuated children start returning to cities by November. Parents figure if bombs aren't falling after 2 months, they probably won't fall at all. Might as well bring the kids home. Schools start reopening. The evacuation scheme is partially reversed. This is a massive mistake. The bombs will come starting in September 1940, but in autumn 1939, the Phony War creates a false sense of security. People start believing maybe this war won't be so bad after all. November 1939. France. French civilians experienced something similar. The mobilization disrupted normal life. Men went to the army. Women took over jobs. Refugees from Alsace-Lorraine were evacuated from the border region. But by November, it feels ridiculous. The Germans aren't attacking, the French army isn't attacking, nothing is happening. Parisians go about their lives normally, cafes are full. The metro runs on schedule, there are some inconveniences, gas masks issued but never used, some rationing. But Paris feels more like peacetime than wartime. Louise Marot works as a secretary in Paris. She writes to her brother, who's a soldier in the Maginot Line, on November 15th. Everyone here is confused. They call it the drôle de guerre because it's absurd. You're in uniform at the front, but you write that you play cards and watch movies. We're supposedly at war, but Paris feels exactly like peacetime. The government keeps saying we must be vigilant. Sacrifice for victory. But what victory? What are we even fighting for if no one is fighting? The dangerous thing about the Phony War is it creates complacency. In Britain and France, people start thinking maybe Hitler won't attack the West. Maybe he's satisfied with Poland. Maybe the war will just peter out. Maybe the declarations were enough to contain Germany. This is wishful thinking. Hitler is planning the Western offensive. He's consolidating forces after Poland. He's building up supplies. He's waiting for spring when weather will favor Blitzkrieg tactics. The Phony War isn't peace. It's preparation. But in autumn 1939, that's not obvious. Civilians on both sides start adapting to a strange new normal. War declared, but not fought. Lives disrupted but not endangered. Anxiety without outlet. November 1939. The Western Front. As autumn turns to winter, conditions on the Western Front deteriorate. British and French soldiers aren't fighting Germans, but they're fighting mud, cold rain. The trenches, hastily dug in September, turn into mud pits. France in November is wet and miserable. Private Thompson's diary entries become shorter, bleaker. November 12th, rained all night, trench flooded, everything wet. November 18th, 3 more men sent to hospital with pneumonia. We've lost more soldiers to illness than combat. November 25th, still no action. Morale terrible. Men are asking what we're even doing here. The British Expeditionary Force is building fortifications, trenches, anti-tank obstacles, pillboxes, preparing for German attack. But the defensive mindset is insidious. Soldiers trained to attack are now trained to wait, to defend, to react rather than act. French troops behind the Maginot Line continue their comfortable existence. But comfort breeds complacency. These soldiers aren't being hardened by combat. They're being softened by routine. And the Germans, they're taking notes, watching, learning. Hitler and his generals observe that Britain and France declared war, but won't fight. They see armies that prefer defense to offense. They recognize an opponent that lacks aggressive spirit. This observation will shape German planning for the May 1940 offensive. Hitler becomes convinced that Britain and France are weak, indecisive, afraid to fight. The Phony War teaches Hitler the wrong lesson, but it's a lesson that will drive his strategy. November 1939, the propaganda war. If Britain and France won't drop bombs on Germany, they'll drop leaflets. This becomes the symbol of Phony War absurdity. The RAF conducts missions over Germany, night flights, dangerous, flying through German airspace, risking anti-aircraft fire and night fighters. But instead of carrying bombs, the planes carry propaganda leaflets. Millions of pieces of paper dropped on German cities. The leaflets contain messages explaining that Germany started an unjust war, that Britain and France are fighting for freedom, that German people should overthrow Hitler. They're written in German, printed on thin paper, bundled and dropped from altitude. German civilians collect the leaflets, some read them, most ignore them. The propaganda has almost no effect. The Nazis control all media in Germany. These leaflets are dismissed as enemy lies. British air crews risk their lives on these missions, flying over hostile territory. Some planes are shot down. And the delivering paper. When one British pilot is asked why they don't drop bombs instead of leaflets, he responds bitterly, because high command thinks we can win the war with strongly worded letters. The absurdity of the phony war captured in one mission type. Real danger, real risk, real casualties, delivering paper. November 1939, the Naval War. The one place where actual combat occurs in late 1939 is at sea. The Atlantic becomes a battleground. German U-boat hunt British merchant ships. British Royal Navy hunts German U-boat. This is real warfare, not phony. On September 3rd, the same day Britain declared war, a German U-boat sank the passenger liner Athenia, killing over 100 people. The Battle of the Atlantic begins immediately. Throughout autumn 1939, German submarines sink British merchant vessels. Britain loses tonnage, resources, sailors. The Royal Navy responds with convoy systems. Anti-submarine warfare, blockades, naval engagements occur. Ships sink, men die. But naval warfare is distant from most people's experience. British civilians read about ships sinking in newspapers, but it doesn't feel immediate. The Western Front remains quiet. British cities remain unbombed. The naval war is real, but for most people, the phony war continues. November 30th, 1939. As November ends, something significant happens. The Soviet Union invades Finland. The Winter War begins. This will be the subject of our next 2 episodes. For Britain and France, the Soviet invasion of Finland creates a dilemma. Should they intervene? Should they declare war on the Soviet Union? They've declared war on Germany for invading Poland. The Soviets also invaded Poland, but Britain and France did nothing. Now the Soviets are invading Finland. What's the response? The answer is more inaction. Britain and France protest diplomatically. They send some aid to Finland, but they don't declare war on the Soviet Union. They don't intervene militarily. The message is clear. Britain and France will declare wars, but won't fight them. They'll protest aggression, but won't stop it. They're hoping to avoid actual combat. Hitler is watching, Stalin is watching. Both dictators are learning the same lesson. Western democracies are weak, they can be pushed, they won't fight. The phony war from September through November 1939 has been a disaster for the Allies. Even though no major battles were fought, every day of inaction gave Germany time to prepare. Every week of defensive posture atrophied Allied offensive capability. Every month of false security built complacency. When the Germans finally attacked in May 1940, the Allied armies would collapse in 6 weeks. France, with its divisions and Maginino Line, would fall faster than Poland. The British Expeditionary Force would be evacuated from Dunkirk in desperate circumstances. The seeds of that disaster were planted during the phony war. The 8 months of watching, waiting, hoping that war could be avoided or delayed. The 8 months of defensive mentality replacing offensive spirit. The 8 months of giving Hitler exactly what he needed, time. Military strategists debate what would have happened if France had attacked Germany aggressively in September 1939. With Germany's best forces in Poland, with German Western defenses incomplete, could France have won the war quickly? Could the Sahara offensive have been pushed through to the ruler? Could World War II have been shortened by years? We'll never know. France chose caution. Britain chose preparation over action. The phony war happened instead. What we do know is this. By the time the real fighting started in May 1940, the psychological advantage belonged to Germany. Hitler's forces had momentum. Allied forces had anxiety. Hitler's generals were confident. Allied generals were defensive. The phony war wasn't boring. It was tragic. It was the West losing the war before the fighting began. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. While British and French soldiers played football in their trenches, while civilians wondered if the war was even real, something else was happening in Northern Europe. On November 30th, 1939 inches, the Soviet Union invaded Finland. Next episode, the Winter War begins. How Finland, a nation of about 3.5 million people with a tiny army, faced the Soviet colossus of around 170 million people with one of the world's largest militaries. How the Soviets expected a quick victory and got a bloody nose instead. how Finnish ski troops became legends, and how the Molotov cocktail got its name. This is the story of David versus Goliath in the snow, the Soviet Union invading Finland, the Winter War, and it's one of the most remarkable military stories of World War II. Subscribe, because the Winter War will show you what happens when a small nation refuses to surrender, when geography favors the defender, and when cold weather becomes a weapon. September to November, 1939, 3 months, 2 armies facing each other, almost no fighting. This was the Phony War. This was the Blitzkrieg.